Hey, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address is theclinicaltrials.guru. One of the best places on the entire internet for clinical trial content and information. The content is especially important for those of you who already work in the industry, but also for study participants and people who are just curious about the industry. Maybe they're family of someone who wants to join a trial, or somebody who wants to actually have a career in this industry, maybe as a study coordinator, CRA, maybe a doctor out there is watching that would like to be an investigator for a clinical trial. This is who this blog is for. And today's podcast, I'm going to get into a lot of viewer questions. There's about 5 good ones on here, and that's probably going to take up the majority of the podcast. But I wanted to start off. There have been 2 very negative articles written about clinical research this week. One of them was written by someone who actually asked me years ago to interview me when I first started this blog. I guess he found some of my videos where I would interview study participants, people who have participated in clinical trials. He found those interesting, and I later learned that he's really against the research, especially psychiatric trials. And I don't know the root of that issue. I've tried to, since I read this article yesterday or 2 days ago, I invited him to come on the show and get interviewed, because I agree with a lot of what he's writing in his article. I don't agree with all of it, but the concept I agree with. And of course, the article, in order to get published, and it was turned down by at least 2 other publications that I can think of based on my prior email discussions with him, because naturally I was curious after he interviewed me and flew all the way out to California from Minnesota to interview me. And then I told him different boarding cares where he can go interview some people who participated in clinical trials before. And these are not homeless people, by the way. These are people who live in boarding cares. They have homes, they have mental illnesses, and they live in boarding cares. And then, of course, the article comes out and it's titled "The Best-Selling Billion-Dollar Pills Tested on Homeless People: How the Destitute and the Mentally Ill Are Being Used as Human Lab Rats." So, again, I've blogged about these kind of things happening in this industry. On my blog, I will put links on this blog post showing you, and I have much more interesting stories than some of the stuff he's talking about. I have a story where a guy was in a trial, not at one of my clinics, but at a site that I know of, where he was in an inpatient study for schizophrenia. And when he wanted to withdraw from the study, they would not let him because he asked to be withdrawn on a Friday night, and the doctors had already left. So they made him wait until Monday, which is a huge no-no, a huge ethics violation, a huge IRB issue. These kind of things happen all the time, and they go unnoticed, they go unreported. But to just make the claim, like this article claims, that most research clinics who participate in psychiatry or who conduct psychiatric clinical trials take advantage of homeless people and specifically recruit homeless people is bad journalism, in my opinion. And it's also extremely wrong, but I understand why he did it. I mean, you have to be extremely shocking. This is shock journalism in order to get published. And he's got a point, and he's trying to prove a point. And he obviously is very passionate about this. I mean, he was willing to fly out back in 2010 or 2011 from Minnesota to Anaheim, spend a few days, one day at my site, and then another day going to different places that I told him where to go to. And then, so he's got something to, I mean, he definitely wants to rant, and that's fine, but to group all research clinics who conduct psychiatric clinical trials in the same category is pretty crazy. I mean, he starts off the article talking about Philadelphia and how he went to a homeless shelter and how people from there were being recruited to do studies. Obviously, it's a huge no-no. You're not supposed to enroll people who are homeless, at least in every single study I've participated in at any of my sites. we're supposed to have proof that they actually have stable residence for at least 6 months. Boarding cures are perfectly fine, and especially the boarding cures I sent him to, they were perfectly fine. And it's funny in the article is extremely negative, but the part where he talks about my company, South Coast Clinical Trials, I mean, other than the fact that we look like idiots by default because we're thrown into this article, um, we actually come out looking pretty good. I mean, he interviewed one of our patients. The guy said, "I love this place. It's awesome. They don't treat you like you have a mental illness." And another one where I sent him to a room and board, he was mentioning how it's in a poor area in South Central Los Angeles, which is true. And we recruit from different boarding cares throughout Orange County and LA. So this was one of the larger ones that I sent him to. He was talking about how it's in a poor area, of course. And I hate to break it to you, but many people with mental illnesses are poor, and that's usually due to the mental illness. You know, their mental illness is not due to poverty. The poverty is due from mental illness. So that's the reason for the poverty. I know many people who got diagnosed with schizophrenia who are educated, who have had good jobs, they were high functioning, and then when the schizophrenia hit and they decompensated, they ended up in boarding cares, and that's the way it is in our society. I understand that, but for him to write an article just grouping all research clinics who conduct clinical trials, we're all monsters, we all enroll homeless people, um, I think is unfair, and he's very anti-pharma. And again, I agree with a lot of his points. There's a lot of fraud, there's a lot more transparency needed in this industry, and that's one of the things my blog tries to do. And then he, of course, talks about the reason I'm blogging is to recruit more patients for my studies or to get more studies for my clinics, which is not entirely true. I mean, this blog is pretty much dedicated to serving people who work in the industry or are interested in working in the industry. I have patient recruitment services for all types of clinical trials, not just psychiatric trials. Cancer, we have healthy volunteer, we have asthma, diabetes, hypertension, all kinds of studies that we conduct, and we do recruitment for on a national level. We also partner with different sites, so I don't blog to get patients. And anyways, the guy's name is Carl Elliott. If you just check out his Twitter page, and look at some of his pictures. I met him in person. He's actually a pretty nice guy. But when you go to his Twitter page, just look at some of his pictures. They are all just negative image after negative image after negative image about some sensationalized topic in clinical research and how mental illness, how psychiatric clinical trials are the devil. That's basically his entire Twitter stream. And he did reply to one of my requests for an interview. He told me that he believes his brother would be a better candidate for me to interview. And I find that pretty ironic considering that he spent all that time getting to me to write his article. But when I want to interview him on my blog and to kind of extend the favor, he sends me to his brother, who I have no idea he even had a brother, first of all. And second of all, I don't know who he is. Apparently, he's promoting a book called White Coat, Black Hat. But his brother didn't write the article. I'll interview his brother, but your brother did not write the article. I'd rather interview you, Carl, so we can discuss your issues, which many of which I agree with. I think there needs to be a lot more transparency in this industry. I think that many research clinics, when it comes to psychiatric trials, but all trials, but psychiatric, definitely it's most prevalent where they do take advantage of the study participants. But that's still the minority of sites. It's not indicative of the entire industry for sites that conduct psychiatric clinical trials. So I think the article is obviously, like all media needs to be these days, extremely sensationalized in order to get views. And that, so far, the article seems to have been getting at least a lot of retweets on Twitter. So just wanted to throw my 2 cents out there. There was another part of the article. There was a part two which I'm not mentioning in that article. Um, it's why doctors are allowed to test. Why are dope addicted, disgraced doctors running our drug trials? And it's written by Peter Aldos. And I'm going to put a tweet out to Peter. Hopefully, he's willing to get interviewed for my podcast. And Carl, it would be a shame if Peter agrees and you don't, considering that you flew all the way out to meet with me and interview me, and you won't return the favor and have a civilized discussion about some issues which I actually feel the same way about you for many of your issues. I just don't agree with everything you're putting out there. So, anyways, that one's about why are dope addicted, disgraced doctors running our drug trials. Interestingly enough, again on my blog back in 2010, we did a video where we talked about a doctor that we know of at another site, not affiliated with our company, how he used to regularly come into the clinic smelling like alcohol. In fact, some of his employees were complaining about it, and rumors spread quickly because it's a small industry. And he's a well-known doctor, still doing trials. So again, not that I don't disagree with this article either. I mean, I that's the only case that I've heard of, but it's another sensationalized article, obviously trying to get page views. Um, but you do need to have this kind of debate and this kind of discussion regarding clinical research because there's, on the other side of the coin, there's so many articles about out there about clinical trials that are so fake in the opposite direction. They're so positive. Everybody who joins a clinical trial is a medical hero, and people who join clinical trials only have the best experiences. They never have side effects. They're always treated, like royalty, and that couldn't be farther from the truth either. The truth is always somewhere in the middle. So just as bad as this article is by Carl and this other guy, just as negative as these articles are, there are articles out there about clinical research that are just like absurdly positive and optimistic. And I don't believe in that. And the purpose of this blog since day one has been to bring just clinical research in plain English from the study participants' perspective, from the people who work in the industry. Let's just demystify this topic and talk about issues that matter to us. So enough about all this negativity, but I had to get my opinion out there. People were asking me, and I didn't even know this article was published, the one Carl wrote, because it was turned down by 2 or 3 magazines. I remember one of them called me to fact check it once, and they didn't end up running with it. They probably looked at his Twitter stream too and thought he was too much of a quack or something. Because there's a lot of anti-pharma people out there. I get it. We work in the industry, but sometimes we're anti-pharma too. I mean, the way they negotiate budgets with us, sites, it's not like we're all pro-pharma, but we do work in this industry, and at the end of the day, clinical trials do provide much more value to society than they do harm. So I think everything needs to be taken with a grain of salt when it comes to what you read online. But enough negativity for one day. Let's get into viewer questions, and more importantly, let's talk about how you can learn, according to this particular question, how to run a research clinic. So this one is from someone who shall remain anonymous. It says, would you suggest as a first step to pay a bit more for someone who has research experience as a first employee to be able to help me get started with the basics? Although we have done a bunch of studies at the office, some of the work was done by this broker SMO that we would want to get rid of, so we don't really have that information. So basically it's saying if you're just starting a brand new clinic, should you pay a little more for someone who has research experience? And I would say yes, if you yourself don't have very much research experience. If you have clinical trial experience, if you were a study coordinator, if you know how to conduct a study, then I would say it's perfectly fine if you bring in someone new that you believe in, that looks promising, and that you can train and kind of teach them the ropes. I would say then you can bring in someone who's not experienced, and obviously the advantage there is you pay them less while they're learning. But if you don't have any experience, I would suggest paying more for someone who does, because you're not going to know you're not going to know what to do either. You need this person to teach you as well. I also do consulting and I do partnering with sites, so let me know if you need help. Question 2, can I double dip by doing studies in my office as well as implementing them in another medical office while holding the contracts for all the studies under one company name? Yes, you can. So the idea is if you have one research site here in one city with one PI and you want to do another research study at another site, or the same research study at another site in another city with a different PI, can you double dip? Yes, you can. This is called the SMO model, Site Management Organization Model. It used to be very popular in the 1990s, where the SMO handles contracts for all of their clinics, but each clinic has its own PI and operates independently, but the contracts are all done under one roof. You can do that. It's done all the time. Double dipping is, that's a nice word for it. It's actually pretty common and it's often done. And then question 3, I know there is no real answer to this question, but realistically, what type of percentage can I expect to pull out from these studies after expenses of paying the PI, the coordinators, everything else, overhead? So there's 2 answers. There's one is it will take you at least a year or more to get completely profitable on your own, meaning you have to get the studies yourself because it's going to take you time to establish these contacts. It's going to take you a good amount of time to actually understand how to run the clinical trials and how your different employees and PIs work together, what different sponsors are looking for. The other option is to partner with someone who's already experienced in research, which, by the way, I do this. I do this with sites throughout the country. I get advisor shares and I help sites out. You can actually get to profitability much quicker in 3 to 6 months with me or with another group similar to what I do. So what type of percentage can you expect to pull out from these studies? A good profit margin will be 30 to 50% after all expenses are paid. You can get higher if you do more of the actual groundwork yourself, like the coordinating. There's a few sites that are research coordinator owned that are doing very well because their expenses are very low. So there is no real answer, you're right. But with 3 or 4 studies going on at any given time, you should be profitable. Okay, provided that you're enrolling in those studies consistently, you should be profitable. So that's really all you need. And then just do the math yourself. Anything after that is complete icing on the cake, bonus, profit, however you want to call it. That's a general rule. So thank you for your questions. To get to the other ones, and those are really good questions too. Here's one. It's about compensating referral physicians. So here's one. If Carl Elliott, the author of that other article, is still watching, maybe you can answer this when I interview you, or maybe I'll ask your brother since you're too busy to go on and do an interview. I'll ask your brother who wrote White Coat, Black Hat, his opinion on this. But since you guys are ethicists and you like these kind of things, this could be a question here. It says, hi Dan, thanks for all the wonderful suggestions. I have 2 questions. We are an SMO. We can hire a recruiting agency to refer subjects to our physician's office and pay them a fee, which is deemed legal, but heard that it is illegal to compensate a referring physician. How do you compensate physician's office to refer their patients for a clinical trial at a different physician office? So yeah, recruiting agencies, it is ethical, legal, common practice to pay recruiting agencies to refer subjects. In fact, I own a recruiting agency where we don't directly refer subjects, but we do all the advertising for each site. So we'll get the budget and we'll run Google ads, Facebook ads, radio ads, newspaper ads, TV ads for different clinical trials throughout the country. We negotiate good rates for all these things because we've been doing it for such a long time from our own sites. And that's perfectly fine. This is actually in our industry, CROs, and there's specialized niche CROs that do this. So I decided to jump in and do the same. As far as directly paying physicians referral fees, those are illegal. I'm not a doctor, but I believe that it's highly frowned upon. So how do you motivate a physician to refer their patients to clinical trial? So oftentimes physicians rely on each other, especially if they're in the same town or the same community, for referrals to each other. So if you're a psychiatrist, you will get referrals from a general practitioner who sees a patient who needs help with a psychiatrist. They'll refer them to you. It also works vice versa. If you're a psychiatrist and one of your patients is developing some kind of medical condition, you refer him to the general practitioner. So find a way to get your PI and the referring doctor to have some kind of symbiotic relationship to where they're kind of, they don't depend on each other because this is not going to be their main source of income. At least referral fees are not going to be, but it's kind of like a favor for a favor. If you refer patients here, we'll refer patients to you. Maybe we can do some kind of support group together, or go to events on the weekends, or those community events where you can get a booth together and co-promote your practices. Find creative things to do with that physician so that you're giving value and that you're also getting something back in exchange. And it doesn't necessarily have to be monetary directly. Like it's not you don't have to directly write them a check. But a lot of times physicians also need people to back them up. So this is especially true if they're physicians that are the same specialty, so two psychiatrists, right? Um, Oftentimes, especially if they're in the same town, they probably work at the same facilities. So a lot of doctors don't just have an office. They have an office, then they make their rounds in the hospitals, then they go to nursing homes, boarding cares, whatever it may be. Well, guess what? Doctors are humans and they take vacations, they get sick, they get too busy, and they need help. They need people to back them up, and this is where their colleagues can come in handy. So oftentimes, just having your PI meet with one of these physicians, maybe invite them to your office for a lunch, bring them a lunch, say, hey, can my PI and some of our staff bring you guys lunch, and we can just discuss ways that we can co-promote our own businesses together. That's been ways that we've done it at my clinics. And no, Carl Elliott, we do not recruit homeless people. Okay, we actually use our own PIs and physicians' private practice database to recruit patients. So we don't go to homeless shelters. So don't believe everything you read from the media out there. It's actually, while I agree that, and not to get back on that topic or sidetracked, while I agree that there are definitely some issues in this industry, and more transparency is needed. The majority of research sites do not need to be lumped into that category, and that article is not indicative of my company or what other research clinics do out there. So yeah, that's what I would do. Like with the physicians, with the referring physicians, find a way to co-promote your businesses together, and get the doctors to talk, and they can become colleagues. And maybe the referring physician would like to be a sub-investigator. That's another option. If you make him or her a sub-investigator, then you can compensate them. You can't compensate them for referrals, but you can say, hey, um, you could be our sub-I. We could pay you when you come in here and do procedures for the study based on our budget. And that's a way for them to get some kind of compensation in a legal and ethical manner. Question 2, we have study doctors at Office A with a PI from Doctor's Office A and a sub-I covering for him from Doctor's Office B. Both are on 1572. Can we request a new site for Doctor Office B with the roles reversed so the PI from B and A, they'll become sub-Is on each other's trials? The answer is yes, you can do this. Now, if it's in the same town and it's like not a huge city like Los Angeles or a huge urban area, it may be harder to argue to a pharma, how are you gonna avoid not recruiting the same patients? And a good argument there is say, hey, each doctor has their own private practice. That's where we recruit from. Um, you can do this. It's done often. This is actually how I built my companies. We had just one site with one PI and a bunch of sub Is, and then we kind of expanded, and all the sub Is eventually became PIs. So yeah, it's done. It's done all the time. Let me know if you need help. I can help you guys out with that. And I want to give my clinical trial guru producers a shout out. It's South Coast Clinical Trials, Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, PT&R, Erdhart Clinical Research LLC, Tradestone LLC, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, Kulkarni Law Firm, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, St. Paul Medical Research Center, Investigators Research Group, Phlebotomy Services, Atria Clinical Research Management, Rheumatic Disease Clinical Research Center, Clinexus Research LLC, Coastal Connecticut Research LLC. If you want to be a clinical trial producer, it's $99 for a lifetime membership. I'm only accepting 100 people, and that's it. I don't care if number 101 is the FDA. Well, I might make an exception for them. They can be a producer, but you get the point. Only 199 bucks lifetime membership. That's it. You get mentioned in every podcast, and you get links from the site, from my blog to your site. You get one link. So thank you guys for watching, and I will put links to the negative articles, Carl Elliott. And hey, the invitation's still out there, man. I'll interview your brother, but I really want to interview you because you're the one who wrote the article. You're the one who I know. You're the one that I spoke to. I'm not asking you to travel out here again. Just do a Skype interview. I'm not going to attack you. We'll just talk. We agree on many things, but we also disagree on several. And there's a couple things I'd like to clear up, and hopefully, I know it's not in your interest because you're very anti-research and anti-pharma and anti-psychiatric trials, but there's people out there who are interested, and it'd be nice. It'd be considered good journalism to have a nice discussion on this for my blog. But if you don't, it's fine. I'll interview your brother. But man, I can't believe you dissed me about, of all things, my flip cam, which was I recorded that video in 2009. And for those of you who don't know, he's kind of taking a jab at why I did a video where I interviewed a doctor in the doctor's car. He didn't like that, I guess, and he said the video was really grainy and it was shaky. Hey man, I'm sorry, but when you're doing video blogging in 2009, and you're really early to the game, you use whatever is available at that time, and it wasn't a cell phone, it was a flip cam, and those things were really cool. So I take issue with that too. Flip cams are awesome, man. Anyways, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more. TheClinicalTrialsGuru.com. Take care.